Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today we're going to make a dadoing jig, and it might be the simplest jig you'll ever make. But if you're new here today, I invite you to subscribe, click the notification bell, and let's get making this simple dadoing jig. Let's have a quick look at the supplies we're going to be using today. So to start off with, I have a 21 by about 14-inch wide piece of 3/4-inch plywood. I have a thin strip of board that's absolutely straight along one side, and I ran that through my jointer, and it's 21 inches by a little over an inch. And that doesn't really matter. You'll see that in a minute. I'm also going to need my carpenter's square today, and we've got some chunks and bits of material around here. I'm going to show you that as well. But before we get started on doing anything, I want to show you the router bits. The router bit I'm going to be using today, this is a 1/4-inch shank, is called a templating bit, and it has the bearing between the shank and the bit. Now, don't get that confused with a flush trim bit. You see how the bearing is at the tip of this one? This has a totally different function. This will not work for what we're doing today. So this is the bit we're going to be using, and I'm going to show you how we use that later on. In a moment, I'm going to be attaching this piece of wood to my plywood, and you can see that I've got a mark on here. This mark wants to be on the inside, and that's because this is the side that went through the jointer, and it's absolutely flat. Now I'm going to want to attach it to the plywood down here, so I've marked roughly the center here and a couple of places where I want to drill some holes. So I'm just going to go off camera to my drill press and just drill those holes quickly, and when I come back we'll start doing the attachment. Now before I go any further, a couple things I want to clarify. So there's the piece of wood with the holes drilled in it, and I have one screw. It's not doing anything, it's just placed in there. This wood is square, but it doesn't matter if this is off or this is off, because when we go over to the table saw, this is the only part that's going to matter. This is my leading edge here, and I'm going to eventually be cutting this in half. And it's important that you do the methodology the way I'm showing you, rather than cut all of these pieces and try and put them together afterward. And the reason for that is if you did all that doing them separately, there's a chance some of these might be off a little bit, and this way is a much easier, quicker way of making sure that both of these are going to be exactly at 90 degrees, each one of these, because we've got it all the way across here. And now I'm going to use my carpenter's square. So what I'm going to do first of all is fasten down one side, and I don't want it fastened really tightly. I just want it just snug, and you may need to hand tighten yours a little bit because you want it to be able to move just a little bit. You don't want it to be sloppy, but you want it to be able to move. A little bit more. Okay, now when I put my square on here, now because this wood is still movable, I can easily move that so that it's exactly perfect. But before I put a screw in there, what I want to do is clamp it so that I make absolutely sure that it's not going to move on me. Now I've changed this around so you get a little bit different perspective for this as well. And this clamp is still, it's a little bit loose in here. You can see I can move this back and forth. But when I have this aligned here, and you can see that this is nicely snugged up all the way along, it's right tight up, and now I can very carefully clamp that down, and I can see that it hasn't moved. And now, only now, can I start putting all of the screws in, and I want to start on this end. Okay, I've preset up the table saw, and now we're just going to cut this piece of plywood with the attached wood on. I'm just going to cut it in half. I should have done this before I did the cut, but even now is fine. So here's where I made the cut, and you can see it's a nice crisp line through there. What I want to do is I want to mark that center just like that, and that's because I want to make sure that I only use this part for making my dado cuts. I don't want to use these because I don't know what these are. Well, there's our two pieces, and you can tell because I've marked them front and back, and I've got this piece of wood. This is just a piece of scrap, and I'm using this because there's a knot here and a crack here, so this area I wouldn't use. So we're going to do the demonstration on that part, and the way it works is quite simply you put, this is going to hook on the front on each side, and I have a shelf here that we're going to use for the demonstration, and this is how easy this jig works. You put the shelf in there, the width of the shelf that you want to cut the dado for, and you move the two pieces together, and you may have one side pre-marked so that you want to know where the shelves are, but that's how you find the thickness. And because I'm using such a narrow board here, I'm using this spacer board at the back, and this really doesn't matter to anything, because what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my clamps and I'm going to fasten that. Now, I've tightened down the clamps, and you can see that the shelf that we have here, the little fake shelf, fits in there nice and snug, so that should be a good fit. I've already set up the router, and you can see when I push this all the way down that it's going to bottom out on the turn here on the other side. Where is it? There it is there. So that's already set. Now, the other thing that I want to show you is I'm going to do something a little more complex too. I'm actually going to do a stop dado. So I'm going to move the router bit over to this area here, and I actually want to go out about a ½ inch as far out as I want to go, and I'm going to mark that in a second. And then basically I'm going to route out this whole area in here, and then we'll show you how you figure out the shelf, the depth of that cutaway, that little rabbit cut on that shelf unit. Now, there's our dado cut, and I did just try this a second ago. But now the question is, you can see at the end here where, how do you get it all the way? Well, what you do is you cut a little piece out of here, and I'm going to show you how you can get a perfect cut out of there very quickly and simply. Now, in my case, I could have gone a little bit further, and I did mean to go a little bit deeper in, because now I've got a little bit of work, because there's where I need to cut the notch from. So I really need to go on this fake little shelf here. I need to go that deep. I'm going to use a pull saw, and basically what I want to do is lay the pull saw along the flat of the wood. Now here's the trick to cutting these little notches. Basically my pull saw is about the thickness of this veneer that I have, and I have all sorts of different veneers of different thicknesses. So what I'm going to do eventually, I'm going to be pulling my pull saw along here to get the cut, but I don't want to be pulling it on this piece of wood here, because I don't want to scratch my nice piece of furniture that I've worked so hard. So what I want to do, I'm going to lift this up, because it's the thickness of that saw blade. So I'm going to lift it up by 2 thicknesses, because I also want to put a piece of wood on here. And now, if I hold that nice and steady, and I actually may take this off a second, just clamp this, because I don't want this wiggling around. And then I'm just going to use my pull saw, and I'm going to pull all the way to here, and then we'll just nip that little bit off there, and that should fit in there absolutely perfectly. There, I just taped that down and that's working perfectly now. Okay, there's the part that I just cut off, and you can see where there's a little mark in there. I'm just going to put my chisel in there. Now that's gone. We'll take the blanks out of there. And now when we put that in, if we get that the right way, that should fit all the way up to the front. And yeah, there we go. See that? A nice tight fit in there all the way around. And that's how you put shelves in. Well, that concludes my video for today. And you know, jigs don't have to be complex. They can be as simple as this one. A couple of pieces of scrap wood, and now you've got a variable. You can put any size shelving unit in there, any width that you want, and make a shelving unit or any kind of a dado cut. And you can make these all sorts of different sizes. It doesn't matter, as long as you make sure that you've got an absolute 90-degree there on each side. You can make perfect shelves. I'm Colin Cadet for WoodWorkWeb. Thanks for watching.